Commercial forestry in India. In this module, you learn about the development and impact of commercial forestry in India. Forests are of immense use. They not only serve as a home to animals, but also provide human beings with things such as herbs and spices, wood pulp for paper, and wood for construction of houses. Commercial forestry is the use of such forest resources for commercial purposes. There's a long history behind the use of forests in India for commercial purposes. This history is filled with instances of large-scale destruction of forests by farmers and villagers for cultivation purposes and traders and colonizers for commercial purposes. During the colonial rule in the 19th century, several forests in India were destroyed by the British due to many reasons. One reason was that the British needed timber to build ships and railways in Britain and its colonies. Another reason was that the British needed wood to be used as fuel to run locomotives. The British also needed to clear land to cultivate industrial raw material and commercial crops such as cotton, jute and sugar, which were required to meet the needs of the industries and the urban population in Europe. Apart from these needs, there was growing demand for rubber, tea and coffee in Europe. So to meet this demand, the British decided to cut several trees to make way for these plantations. The Indian Forest Act of 1865 was amended twice. According to the new clauses of the Act, forests were divided into three categories: reserved forests, protected forests and village forests. Reserved forests were the best quality forests that were solely for government use, while protected forests and village forests were other forests accessible to villagers for their own use. To systematize forestry even further, the Imperial Forest Research Institute was started in 1906 in Dehradun. This institute initiated the system of scientific forestry, in which different types of trees were cut down to plant one type of tree in several rows. This method of planting trees is called plantation. According to the new forest laws, hunting was also prohibited in several areas of the forests. So the nomads and the pastoralists who survived in hunting of animals from the forests had to abandon their practice and work in government industries and mines in miserable working conditions. Although hunting was prohibited for villagers, nomads and pastoralists, under the colonial rule, animals such as tigers and leopards were hunted enormously by the British as a sport. This hunting by the British reached such an extent that later these animals ran the risk of becoming extinct. While the villagers, farmers, nomads and pastoralists lost out in many ways due to the laws enforced by the British, traders and colonizers benefited from these laws. Over a period of time, large European firms were given the sole right to trade in forest products, therefore making the lives of people who were mainly dependent on forests miserable. Let's recall what you have learned. Commercial forestry is the use of forest resources for commercial purposes. During the colonial rule in India, several forests were destroyed by the British. Over a period of time, the British started getting worried about the large-scale felling of trees. So they appointed an officer, Dietrich Brandis, to lay down certain rules for the use of forests. With the help of Dietrich Brandis, the Indian Forest Service was set up in 1864 and the Indian Forest Act was formulated in 1865. According to the clauses of the Indian Forest Act, forests were divided into three categories: reserved forests, protected forests and village forests. The Imperial Forest Research Institute was started in 1906. This institute initiated the system of scientific forestry, which followed the plantation method. The plantation method, set up by the British, affected various communities. Villagers were not allowed to use forests. Even hunting in forests was prohibited. Under the colonial rule, animals such as tigers and leopards were hunted enormously by the British for fun.